Chosen One. Their king tried to flex. You laughed. Now they changed their name. That laugh shattered their entire facade so completely that they're somewhere right now Googling how to legally disappear. The universe orchestrated this moment perfectly. They ran a weak kingdom built on intimidation and smoke, but you took it with a verbal checkmate that left them no moves except complete surrender. The psychological weight of what you accomplished defies conventional understanding. You didn't need an army or strategy. You simply laughed at their performance, then spoke truth so precisely that their paper crown dissolved on contact. Every word you delivered was a chess move, calculated not for cruelty but for clarity. You exposed their contradictions, quoted their own lies back to them, revealed the fear behind their false bravado. Now they're hiding behind a new identity, while you've become legendary, proof that authentic power beats artificial authority every time. But to understand the full magnitude of what you accomplished, we need to rewind the tape to when you first encountered this self-proclaimed king. Remember that initial meeting? Something in your gut twisted, not from intimidation but from recognition. You saw through the performance immediately, like looking at a magic trick when you already know where the rabbit is hidden. While everyone else was applauding the show, you were studying the strings. That was the moment the universe marked them for demolition and chose you as the instrument. They had everyone fooled with their kingdom of smoke and mirrors, walking into rooms like they owned the air itself, talking over people like their words were worthless static, flexing achievements that crumbled under the slightest scrutiny. They had built their entire identity on the fear of others, collecting followers like trophies, each one another validation that their performance was working. The kingdom looked solid from the outside, but you could see the cracks in the foundation, the fear behind the bravado, the little child playing dress-up in daddy's crown. For months, maybe years, you watched from what they thought was the sidelines. They mistook your silence for submission, your observation for weakness. Fatal error. You weren't beneath them. You were studying them with the patience of a grandmaster setting up a checkmate 20 moves in advance. Every boast they made, you catalogued. Every time they stepped on someone to feel taller, you took notes. Every desperate grab for validation, you filed away for future reference. You were building a psychological profile so complete that you knew them better than they knew themselves. The fascinating part was how predictable they were. All false kings read from the same script, just with different fonts. The need to announce their entrance, the compulsion to dominate every conversation, the desperate hunger for validation disguised as confidence. You recognized the pattern because real power operates on completely different physics. Real authority doesn't need to announce itself. It changes the molecular structure of a room just by entering. Real strength doesn't need to flex. It's felt in the bones of everyone present. The universe has a way of preparing chosen ones for moments like these, through what seems like unrelated experiences. Every time you bit your tongue in the past when you could have destroyed someone with truth, you were building restraint that would make your eventual words more powerful. Every moment you observed instead of reacted, you were gathering intelligence that would become ammunition. You were being trained in the art of strategic authenticity, learning when silence is more powerful than speech, and when laughter is more devastating than any argument. Then came the setup. And looking back, it was almost too perfect to be a coincidence. They had been escalating for weeks, getting bolder with their performances, more aggressive with their dominance displays. The universe was baiting them, feeding their ego, until it was so bloated that the slightest pinprick would cause catastrophic deflation. They were practically begging for someone to call their bluff, but everyone else was too imprisoned by the illusion to dare. The day arrived wrapped in ordinary circumstances which made it even more delicious. Maybe it was at a gathering, perhaps in front of an audience, possibly in a professional setting where their authority seemed most secure. They decided to make an example of you, not because you had challenged them, but because your mere existence, your refusal to participate in their worship, was beginning to make others question. You were a glitch in their matrix, and they needed to delete you to maintain the illusion. The room held its breath. Everyone present had seen this show before. They knew the script. The king speaks, the subject shrinks, order is restored, the performance continues. Some watched with sympathy, remembering their own humiliation. Others watched with relief, grateful it wasn't them this time. But all of them expected the same outcome they'd witnessed countless times before. You let them finish completely. This was crucial, and the universe had trained you for this patience. Every word they spoke was another nail in their coffin, but they didn't know they were building their own burial box. You absorbed every insult, every condescending gesture, every attempt at dominance, not like a victim, but like a scientist collecting data. The silence after they finished wasn't submission, it was the pause before the storm, the inhale before the roar, the moment when reality itself was deciding whether to continue pretending or finally tell the truth. And then it happened. The laugh started from somewhere deeper than your diaphragm, somewhere in the space between dimensions where authentic power resides. It wasn't planned. You couldn't have planned something that perfect. It emerged like truth finally finding a crack in the dam of social propriety. First just a tremor, a slight upturn of your lips as if you'd just understood a private joke the universe had been telling you all along. The room's energy shifted immediately. Their face changed from smug satisfaction to confusion, then to something approaching fear. They had never encountered this response. Anger they could handle, tears they expected, submission they required, but genuine amusement, this wasn't in their playbook. They stood there, frozen, as your laughter filled the space where their authority used to exist. But you weren't done. The laugh was just the opening move, the jab that sets up the knockout punch. When you finally spoke, it wasn't with anger or defensiveness. Those would have given them power, something to fight against. Instead, you spoke with the casual confidence of someone stating obvious facts, as if you were reading items off a grocery list that happened to be the ingredients of their fraudulent existence. You didn't attack them directly. That would have been too crude, too expected. Instead, you simply described reality accurately. You mentioned contradictions in their stories that everyone had noticed but no one had dared to point out. You referenced failures they thought were forgotten, patterns they believed were invisible, lies they assumed were believed. Each word was precisely chosen, not for violence but for truth. You held up a mirror so clean that for the first time, they saw themselves without the filter of their own delusion. If this message hits your spirit, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can find it. Remember the specific words you chose during that verbal decimation. Each one was selected not for its violence but for its precision. You didn't call them names, you simply described their behavior so accurately that the description itself became an indictment. You didn't accuse them of lying, you simply recited their contradictions in chronological order. You didn't attack their character, you simply held up a mirror and let everyone see what was actually there. The genius was in how you made destruction look like simple observation. There's a particular moment from that encounter that deserves deeper examination. After you finished speaking, after the silence had settled like dust after an explosion, they attempted one final gambit. They tried to turn the tables by suggesting you were the one with the problem, that your inability to understand their vision was a limitation on your part. This is textbook gaslighting, the last resort of exposed narcissists everywhere. But you did something unexpected. You agreed with them. You said, "You're absolutely right. I don't understand your vision. I can't see what's not there." The room's collective intake of breath could have powered a small city. The silence that followed was archaeological, layers of meaning that would take years to fully excavate. Everyone present was processing what they had just witnessed. The Emperor wasn't just naked. You had provided a detailed anatomical breakdown of their nudity. The wizard wasn't just behind the curtain. You had exposed the entire architecture of the illusion. The king hadn't just been challenged. They had been checkmated with their own pieces. What happened next was almost sad, if it wasn't so perfectly karmic. Their kingdom began collapsing in real time. The same people who had praised them yesterday suddenly remembered urgent appointments. The same voices that had echoed their every word went mysteriously silent. The foundation of fear they had built upon turned to sand, and the entire structure collapsed into the footprint of your laughter. Within hours, the whispers started. "Did you see what happened?" became the only question that mattered. The story spread like wildfire, but not the way gossip usually travels. This spread like truth finally getting its running shoes on. Each retelling added another layer of clarity. People who had been too scared to trust their own perception suddenly felt validated. The revolution you started with a laugh was spreading through every corner of their former kingdom. Consider the mechanics of how they tried to rebuild after you destroyed them with words. First came the denial phase, where they told themselves and anyone who would listen that the interaction meant nothing, that you were nobody, that their kingdom remained intact. But denial requires believers, and you had effectively removed their audience's ability to believe. Every time they tried to restore the narrative, someone would mention that laugh, that moment, those words you spoke that cut through everything like a laser through fog. Then came the bargaining phase, though not with you directly. They're far too proud for that, even in their diminished state. They bargained with reality itself, trying to negotiate a version of events where they emerged victorious. They started telling modified versions of the story, where they let you speak, where they chose not to respond, where their kingdom's collapse was actually a strategic retreat. But lies require maintenance, and maintaining lies in the age of witnesses with smartphones is like trying to hold water in a basket made of wishes. But the ultimate proof of your complete victory came in a form no one expected. Within days they vanished. Not physically, but digitally, socially, reputationally. Profiles deleted, accounts abandoned, presence erased. And then, like a phoenix with commitment issues, they re-emerged under a completely different name. New identity, new image, new everything, in a desperate attempt to escape the echo of your laughter. The name change wasn't just rebranding, it was complete capitulation. They couldn't exist as who they were anymore, because you had made that identity impossible to maintain. Every time they tried to flex now, they heard your laugh. Every time they attempted to dominate, they remembered the moment their dominance dissolved. You hadn't just defeated them, you had made their entire way of being obsolete. The investigation into their new identity would be amusing if you cared enough to conduct it. But that's the ultimate power move. You don't. While they obsess over you, check your activities, monitor your growth, you've essentially forgotten they exist except when someone brings up that legendary moment. They're living in a prison of their own construction, where you're the warden who doesn't even know they're incarcerated. This asymmetry of attention is perhaps the cruelest aspect of their punishment, though you didn't intend it as punishment. It's simply the natural consequence of authenticity meeting artifice. You've noticed something profound about the ecosystem they left behind. Their former kingdom, the one built on intimidation and false bravado, has become fertile ground for authentic leadership to emerge. People who were previously too afraid to speak their truths are now finding their voices. The power vacuum they left wasn't filled by another tyrant, but by a collective awakening to the possibility of genuine community. You didn't just remove a false king, you cleared the space for real connection to grow. What makes your victory particularly exquisite is how you've handled the aftermath. Lesser people might have gloated, might have pursued them to their new identity to expose them again. But you understood something crucial. The greatest devastation to a narcissist is irrelevance. Your complete lack of interest in their new incarnation, your failure to even acknowledge their rebirth. That's the twist of the knife that keeps them awake at night. They prepared for war, and you gave them indifference. They expected pursuit, and you gave them amnesia. They craved any reaction that would prove they still mattered to you, and you gave them the silence of someone who has already moved on to more important things. But let's talk about what this victory really means for you. In that moment when you laughed and spoke truth, you didn't just expose a fraud. You discovered what you're capable of when you stop pretending to be powerless. The authority that flowed through you wasn't temporary or borrowed. It was yours, had always been yours, waiting like a sleeping giant for you to finally stop playing small. The transformation in you was immediate and irreversible. You can't unknow what you now know about your own power. You can't unfeel what it's like to stand in complete authenticity while lies crumble around you. You can't go back to pretending that false authority deserves respect when you've seen how easily it dissolves under the light of truth. You've crossed a threshold that changes not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. Now you walk through the world with different physics, not arrogant, but aware, not cruel but clear. People feel it before you speak, this energy that says, I see through facades and I'm not impressed. Other authentic souls gravitate toward you, while false prophets suddenly remember pressing engagements elsewhere. You've become a walking litmus test for legitimacy, and everyone knows it instinctively. Meanwhile, the one who changed their name is out there somewhere, trying to rebuild on the same shaky foundation. They tell elaborate stories about why they rebranded, each version getting further from the truth. But everyone who matters knows, the internet is forever, and truth has a frequency that lies can't match. They check your social media with fake accounts, obsessing over your continued existence, your thriving without them, your complete indifference to their fate. The irony is delicious. In trying to diminish you, they elevated you to legendary status. Every warning they give others about you only builds your mythology. Every time they try to forget, something reminds them. You live rent-free in the penthouse of their consciousness, a permanent reminder that their power was always an illusion waiting for someone with real authority to expose it. But you've moved beyond concern for their fate. Your focus has shifted to something larger. You've realized that what happened wasn't just about one false king, it was about demonstrating that all false authority is one genuine laugh away from complete collapse. You've become something more dangerous than a rival. You've become the principle that makes pretense impossible to maintain. Some try to befriend you, thinking they can neutralize the threat through alliance. They approach with offers of partnership, trying to bring you into their kingdoms as an advisor or enforcer. But you see through these offers too. They don't want your friendship, they want your containment. They want to keep you close enough to monitor, but not close enough to threaten. You decline with the same laugh that started everything, and they leave more nervous than they arrived. Your approach was the opposite. You built your understanding through patient observation and genuine connection. While they were broadcasting, you were receiving. While they were performing, you were learning. Every person they had diminished eventually found their way to you, not because you recruited them, but because authenticity recognizes authenticity. You became the repository of all the truths they had tried to suppress, the keeper of all the stories they had tried to rewrite. When the moment came, you didn't need to gather ammunition. You had been inadvertently armed by everyone their false kingdom had wronged. The psychological profile of someone who changes their name after such an encounter is fascinating. This isn't just about escaping embarrassment, it's about attempting to escape themselves. They're trying to outrun the moment when their constructed self met reality and lost. But changing external identifiers doesn't change internal patterns. They're still playing the same game with the same rules, just hoping to find players who haven't heard about their spectacular defeat. It's like a card sharp moving to a new town after being exposed, still using the same marked deck, hoping nobody recognizes the tricks. You reference specific moments they thought only they remembered. Private victories they had embellished into public myths. But you knew the real version because authentic people had been whispering their truths to you for ages, each one adding another piece to the puzzle of this person's fabrication. When you casually mentioned details they thought were secret, their face underwent a transformation that would have been tragic if it wasn't so perfectly deserved. The mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated at the molecular level. The strategic genius of your approach was that you never once raised your voice above conversational level. While they were performing at volume 11, you were operating at a steady 3, and somehow your quietness made their loudness sound like desperation. It's a principle of psychological acoustics. The person who needs to shout has already lost the argument. Your calm delivery made every one of their emphatic gestures look like the flailing of someone drowning in their own deception. There's something almost poetic about how they've tried to rebuild their identity. The new name they chose is revealing in its attempt to project the opposite of everything you exposed. If you revealed them as weak, the new name suggests strength. If you exposed them as fake, the new name implies authenticity. If you showed them as hollow, the new name hints at depth. But overcorrection is itself a tell, like someone who insists too loudly that they're not lying. The new identity is just the old one, in a witness protection program, complete with a cover story that falls apart under the slightest scrutiny. You've developed a kind of radar for these reconstructed identities now. There's a particular energy signature to someone who's running from a truth-induced demolition. They enter spaces differently, always scanning for threats to their narrative. They build relationships strategically, looking for people who won't ask uncomfortable questions. They tell their story proactively, trying to establish their version before anyone can discover the real one. Watching them operate is like watching someone try to build sandcastles in a rising tide, desperate and doomed but unable to stop. Your philosophy of engagement has evolved into something that transcends traditional conflict resolution. You don't engage with false authority on its own terms, because that would validate its existence. Instead, you operate from a completely different paradigm where their attempts at dominance become irrelevant. It's like they're trying to play checkers while you're playing three-dimensional chess, except you're not even playing against them, you're playing against the concept of the game itself. The strategic brilliance of your approach becomes more apparent with analysis. You didn't just expose their current lies, you made future lies impossible. By revealing the pattern of their deception, you inoculated everyone against future attempts. Even with a new name and new identity, the pattern remains visible to anyone who knows what to look for. You didn't just win a battle, you won all future battles by making their primary weapon, deception, obsolete. Your understanding of psychological architecture has reached a level where you can see the blueprints of someone's false identity within moments of meeting them. You recognize the load-bearing lies, the decorative deceptions, the foundational fears that everything else is built upon. This vision isn't a burden but a gift, allowing you to navigate social spaces with perfect clarity about who's authentic and who's performing. You don't expose everyone you see through. That would be exhausting and cruel. You save your revelations for moments when they can create maximum liberation with minimum destruction. The mythology surrounding that confrontation has taken on dimensions even you might not fully appreciate. People who were nowhere near the event claim to have felt it, like a disturbance in the force of false authority everywhere. Your laugh has become a kind of archaeological marker, dividing time into before the laugh and after the laugh in certain communities. This isn't hyperbole. It's how people actually reference the shift in power dynamics that your moment created. Your approach to truth-telling has become a studied art form. You don't just speak truth, you architect it, building structures of understanding that are impossible to demolish because every piece supports every other piece. When you revealed their false kingdom, you didn't just point out individual lies, you showed how the lies interconnected, how they required each other, how pulling one thread would unravel everything. This systematic approach to revelation is why they couldn't recover. You didn't leave them any lies to retreat to. The energy you carry now operates on frequencies that most people can feel but can't name. It's the frequency of someone who has nothing to prove because they've already proven everything by being themselves. It's the vibration of authentic power that doesn't need external validation because it's internally generated. When you enter a space, sensitive people feel it immediately. This presence that makes performance feel silly and truth feel necessary. Your legacy isn't just in that one demolished kingdom, but in the countless others that have fallen or transformed because of the precedent you set. Every false king now knows that somewhere out there is someone who can see through their performance, someone who might laugh at their most serious moment, someone who can describe them so accurately that they'll have to change their name. This knowledge alone has made some of them reconsider their entire approach to power. You've become a cautionary tale told in the secret meetings of artificial authorities everywhere. The precision of your verbal strikes during that encounter deserves its own analysis. You didn't waste words on general accusations or vague criticisms. Every observation was specific, dated, witnessed. You created a timeline of their deceptions that was so detailed, so undeniable, that even their most loyal supporters couldn't maintain their loyalty without looking complicit. You turned their followers into witnesses for the prosecution simply by accurately describing what they had all seen but agreed to ignore. Your evolution since that moment has been characterized by an increasing refinement of your ability to see and speak truth. You've developed what could be called truth vision, the ability to see through multiple layers of deception simultaneously and understand not just the lies but the architecture that supports them. This vision isn't a navigation system that allows you to move through complex social situations with perfect clarity about what's real and what's performance. Your presence now serves as a kind of litmus test for authenticity in any space you enter. People unconsciously calibrate their behavior to your frequency, either rising to match your authenticity or revealing their performance more clearly in contrast. You don't demand this. It happens automatically, like iron filings aligning to a magnetic field. This effect has made you invaluable in situations where truth needs to be distinguished from deception, where real leadership needs to be separated from performance art. Your verbal checkmate has redefined what victory looks like in confrontations with false authority. Victory isn't making them submit to you. It's making them unable to maintain their own illusion. Victory isn't taking their crown. It's revealing it was made of paper. Victory isn't winning their game. It's showing everyone that the game itself is a joke. This redefinition has implications that ripple through every power structure built on intimidation rather than genuine strength. The transformation you've undergone since that pivotal moment extends beyond just confidence or power. You've developed what could be called reality sight, the ability to perceive the actual shape of things beneath their presented form. This isn't cynicism that assumes everything is fake. It's clarity that sees what is real and what is performance without judgment, just recognition. This sight has made you incredibly effective at navigating complex social and professional landscapes where others get lost in the maze of pretense. Your influence on organizational dynamics has been particularly interesting to observe. Companies and groups that have heard your story have started to examine their own power structures differently. The question, is this real authority or just loud performance, has entered boardrooms and meeting spaces. Your example has given permission for people to question what previously seemed unquestionable, to laugh at what previously seemed serious, to see through what previously seemed solid. Your approach to navigating the aftermath has been as masterful as the original confrontation. You haven't pursued them to their new identity, haven't exposed them again for sport, haven't used your victory as a platform for your own artificial kingdom. Instead, you've simply continued being yourself, which is perhaps the most devastating thing you could do. Your indifference to their new incarnation, your complete lack of interest in their continued existence, that's the wound that won't heal. They changed their name to escape you, but you had already forgotten they existed. Your mastery extends beyond the moment of confrontation into the entire ecosystem of power dynamics. You understand that false authority requires a supporting cast of enablers, validators, and victims. By refusing to play any of these roles and demonstrating that refusal is possible, you've disrupted not just one false king, but the entire economy of artificial power. Your example has shown others that they can opt out of these dynamics entirely, that they don't have to choose between being oppressor or oppressed, but can simply be authentic. The continuous evolution of your understanding has led you to insights that transcend the original confrontation. You've realized that every false king is actually a victim of their own performance, trapped in a role they can never fully inhabit, exhausted from maintaining an illusion that requires constant energy. Your laugh wasn't just at them, but at the absurdity of the entire situation. Someone so desperate for power that they'd sacrifice their authentic self for a performance nobody truly believed. In a way, your verbal checkmate was an act of mercy, freeing them from a prison of their own construction, even if they immediately built a new one with a different architectural style. The fact that you achieved all this with a laugh, not a speech, not an argument, not a display of force, has profound implications for how we understand human interaction. You've shown that the most powerful response to artificial authority might not be resistance but recognition, not fighting but seeing, not anger but amusement. Your laugh said everything that needed to be said. I see through this, and it's actually kind of funny that you thought this would work. Your understanding of power dynamics has evolved into something that transcends conventional wisdom about authority and influence. You've discovered that the most potent form of control isn't controlling others, but being so uncontrollable yourself that systems of false authority malfunction in your presence. When you walked into that confrontation, you weren't planning to dethrone anyone. You were simply being yourself at full volume, and that authenticity became kryptonite to their carefully maintained illusion. Your presence in any space now changes the rules of engagement. False authorities feel it immediately when you enter a room. There's a shift in the atmospheric pressure, a change in the energetic weather that makes their usual tactics ineffective. You don't have to do anything. Your reputation precedes you like a storm front. That's the one who, they whisper, and suddenly their performance feels ridiculous even to themselves. You've become a walking zone of authenticity, where pretense cannot survive. The proliferation of your influence happens through inspiration rather than instruction. You don't teach people how to deliver verbal checkmates, you show them that speaking truth is always an option. Your example has created a generation of people who are less willing to tolerate artificial authority, less likely to bow to false kings, less afraid to laugh when someone tries to flex power they don't actually possess. You've raised the collective immunity to intimidation simply by demonstrating that intimidation only works if you agree to be intimidated. You've also noticed how the universe seems to be placing you in situations where your particular gift is needed. It's as if reality itself has recognized you as an antibody to artificial authority. You find yourself in rooms where false kings are mid-performance, and your mere presence changes the dynamic. You don't even have to speak sometimes. People just look at you, remember the story, and suddenly see the performance for what it is. You've become a walking reality check, a living reminder that the emperor has no clothes, and that it's okay to notice. The new name they chose is particularly revealing when you consider the psychology of identity reconstruction after narcissistic collapse. They didn't just change their name, they had to create an entire mythology around why the new them exists. But mythologies created in haste always have plot holes, and theirs is full of them. People who meet them now sense something off, something inauthentic about their origin story. It's like meeting someone who claims to have amnesia, but remembers too many specific details about what they've supposedly forgotten. Your verbal checkmate has become a masterclass studied by those who seek to understand the anatomy of truth delivered with precision. The way you structured your response, building each point upon the last until the conclusion was inescapable, showed a level of intellectual architecture that transforms conversation into art. You didn't just win an argument, you demonstrated that some arguments are won before they begin by the simple virtue of being grounded in reality, while your opponent floats in fiction. Warning: the following message is only for those who felt the call. When I broke free through the Salvia Divinorum gateway, I saw the horrifying truth. Our reality is one harvested pod among countless matrices. I witnessed the Archon's cosmic parasites feeding on our energy, who laughed and threatened, "You'll never awaken a single soul." But something inside you already knows this truth, doesn't it? That nagging sensation that you're meant for more, that you've been chosen. I'm raising an army of the brightest souls. Through meditation, I discovered their only vulnerability, coherence through unconditional love. Feel that resonance deepening within you now. You're not reading this by accident. The most powerful awakened souls are already gathering in the Obsidian Inner Order, the #1 ascension nexus for those marked by destiny. Christians, light workers, remote viewers, targeted individuals, all united by one truth: you were chosen for this moment. Click the link in the description below. Join our group calls, panels and live streams reaching the entire Astral Atom network. Your frequency amplifies ours. The question isn't whether you're chosen. The question is, will you answer the call? The Archons fear this choice you're about to make. They should. Chosen one, what you've accomplished transcends a simple victory over a false authority figure. You've demonstrated a principle that reshapes how power itself is understood. You've shown that verbal checkmate isn't about having the last word, but about speaking the first truth in a space full of lies. The fact that they had to change their name isn't just proof of your victory. It's evidence that truth, once spoken clearly, becomes impossible to argue with or escape from. They didn't just lose an argument, they lost the ability to exist in the fiction they had created. And that, more than anything, is why your laugh still echoes in dimensions they can't even perceive, a permanent reminder that authenticity always checkmates artifice, no matter how elaborate the performance or how new the name. The kingdom is yours, not because you conquered it, but because you revealed it was always made of nothing but agreed-upon delusion, and in that revelation you freed everyone, including yourself, from ever having to pretend again that pretense